That's the psychological game that every founder goes through. Find the smartest people in that college, talk to them about starting their company. You'd be surprised at who you can get.
All right. So with me today is Daniel Kivatinos. Daniel Kivatinos is a successful second-time YC founder with his first company, Dr. Chrono, which was a top 30 startup exit for YC. Daniel put in the grind for 14 years and raised millions of dollars. And Daniel got into YC again with his current company, JustPaid.ai. So JustPaid is a smart new way to generate invoicing and to receive payments. Sort of think of it as an assistant to help a company's finance team. And with the accounting shortage in the US, JustPaid's work is definitely solving a deep, deep pain. JustPaid is solving a problem that doesn't exactly jump out at us in our everyday lives. How did you get into this unsexy space, Daniel?
I started a company called Dr. Chrono way back when, and I saw the problem there, but not just there. I saw the problem in other startups where, you hire generally a finance team and the finance team helps with the company. And this is just one of those things where as you build a company and as you become successful, you start to generate more and more revenue. And as you generate more and more revenue, you tend to have to figure out ways to collect that revenue. And a lot of the time you are just hiring people. It's just a people-driven industry today. And, it's kind of like drivers of cars and drivers of rigs. Today it's primarily people. What is it going to look like in 10 years, right? Are you going to have just people driving cars anymore? The answer is probably maybe. There might be an approach where some people are driving cars and others are automated. I kind of view the same thing with accounts receivable. AP, they call it AR, and then there's AP, accounts payable. So accounts receivable is every business needs to generate revenue. The thing is, it's just a very painful process. Did this customer pay us? Can we pay these bills? Because an example is you're a broker of something like servers or whatever. You're basically leasing $100,000 worth of servers, getting that server space for somebody, and it's $100,000. So you have, you basically lease it for $100K, but then this person owes you $100K. So you're figuring out who owes what, who, it gets really confusing. Hire people to literally I'd call it bean counting, where you're literally figuring out where's all the money, who owes us what. And then can we make these payments over here because we, these people owe us hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Can we do this and that? So generally it's as companies are more successful, and it's very hard in the early days to see this. But, if you're generating $100 million in revenue, how do you think you're going to collect? How does that revenue get collected, right? Who generally it's just people making sure invoices go out and people make payments. And it's a people-driven industry. So, I met with my co-founder, Analia, and my other co-founder, Renee, prior to starting this company. And we just kind of said, this is a problem. It's a really specific problem every business in the United States has at some level. And it's huge. And it's not just the United States, it's across the globe. But it's, can you impact and support businesses as they scale and become more successful and build something meaningful in that way to that would be fun to work on. And I think really passionate about this, and Vinay got really passionate, and I felt like it was a really good space to go into. It just, the market's not only big, but it's also, there's a need where when you have people-driven industries, there tends to be disruption down the road if the technology's there, and AI is here, and all this money's going into AI right now. It's just a really big industry. So
how did you decide to start there after such a successful exit with Dr. Chrono? You could have done pretty much anything or nothing at all. Why did you decide to do JustPaid and solve this problem?
When you are an entrepreneur, I think you have so much time in life, right? Life is short. And if you want to start businesses, you have to do it fairly quickly when you're you have the energy. And, we're all, the way I look at it is we're all going to die. We only have so much time, and what impact, what legacy do you want to leave on, out there for people to think of you and what you're working on? Just sitting around for me doesn't sound appealing. Honestly, it doesn't sound like fun for me. I think part of the journey of just going and learning and, becoming a founder is a very, very, as weird as it sounds, it's a better way to learn than school. Like I learned a lot in school. School was amazing. I actually, the school I went to, Stony Brook University, was amazing, but I love the journey of like learning. And I think the camaraderie of having a team and having a mission, it's so impactful. Like it really, for me, is almost like you have your family, that's there, you have friends, but then there's this mission that you work on with a group of people, and you get really smart people in a room. Like amazing things can happen that you could never expect, right? Like SpaceX, who would have thought that would have been successful? Nobody thought that was going to be successful, but you put really smart people in a room and they all feel like they're on a mission. You get this really amazing output, and that excites me. And I'm like, that drives me a lot, where I can work on something for 10, 15 years because we have a mission to do something important and the team is behind me, and it's a lot of fun. That's a part that really like pulled me back in very quickly. And honestly, it's finding the right people that like are passionate and you feel like can do it. You don't want to start a company, and this is another thing, with people that you just are not excited working with. You want people that you believe in and are smarter than you, that can like help you get to the goal, whatever that goal is. And so picking the right people to work with is so important in the early days. It's so critical. And VCs always think about this, like, what does the founding team look like, right? Like, it's so important. It's so important to a company because that dynamic creates the value from their energy and the way that they're like thinking about the business and the way that they play off of each other and their expertise and their skill set.
How would you make your first hires, like if you were starting another company today, or maybe even for JustPaid, since you relatively recently began JustPaid, how do you make sure you really have got the right people in the right places and that you're screening for the right talent? That's tough. I think there's not a single founder I know that would say they've done it perfectly. It's something that a lot of people struggle with. How do you do it?
I mean, you're never going to get it perfect. You're never going to like build it is a game of like sport where you're kind of building the team, and the team is always changing. So it may not be the same people throughout the life of the company. In different phases, you hire for different people. I was talking to the founder of Mercury, and in the early days, he just could get whoever he could get, whoever could believe in his vision. That's generally like what is true, is you try to find people that like are believers, but also people that are not negative, or, they kind of pull you down. Everybody thinks it's all like IQ, right? Like building a company. A lot of it is like EQ, like emotional intelligence. You want to know, can I work with this person? Can they do something amazing? And, a lot of, again, like investors look at it this way, like the most successful companies they may not be the most smartest people. They might just be the people that are like committed to the mission and get it to 0 to point like 8 billion, where they're hugely successful. Look for people that want to work with you in the early days, and look for people that are not like mercenaries. And what's a mercenary? Somebody wants a $400,000 salary, RSUs in your company, and they want security, and they want to make sure the company has $700 million in the bank. People, there are generally mercenaries that are like that, and they're really good at what they do. Like, and you want to hire people like that because they're good at what they do. But in the early days, those are not the right people for the company. You want someone who it's kind of like a ragtag team, like Moneyball. I don't know. Everyone who is like into startups should look at the movie Moneyball. Like, just watch that movie once and you'll understand. You're going to work with imperfect people that have personalities. And the reality is, even when you get those mercenaries, they're imperfect also. And they have their own vision of what the company is going to be. So, but in the early days, when you have a missionary, they're like working for 1/5 the salary. And they just don't care about the salary because they really want to work on something that they want to work on. And they like you and you like them, and you start like riffing off each other, and you start figuring out, okay, this is the way the company is going to get built. And, every founder has some superpowers. One of mine was like just getting people to want to work with us. That was a superpower in the early days of, I'd say, just any company I work with. It's people generally want to work around really positive people. And I would say I'm generally a very positive person, and people like that. A lot of them are missionaries. They want to jump in, they start to just try to do stuff, and you see if it's a good dynamic working with them.
How did you decide on your mission, and like how do you like find a worthy mission that like you and your team could like work endlessly behind and, you know, persevere, endure, have that grit? Like how did you pick that? And how do you inspire like your team and like potential talent to like get behind that mission and be like a missionary? You probably don't just encounter talent in the wild who's like, I want to change invoicing. I want to join a company that changes the way like finance departments run. Like from the get go, you probably have to do something more there. How do you make that magic happen?
I mean, you really don't know what the right idea is in the early days. Like, Apple did not think about the iPhone from day one. They didn't think they were going to become like this amazing company with the iPhone. Like, that was not what they were thinking about when they started. They were like, all right, we're going to try to sell a small computer for a home. And they had a really rough version of this thing where they could only make so many, and it just didn't work that well. And it was a rough path for Apple. Like, they didn't get there overnight. Like, it wasn't easy. They almost went bankrupt. They were on the brink of bankruptcy, where Microsoft bailed them out with a big, like, big amount of money. Who knew Microsoft would do that? I think the same thing with Nvidia. They didn't think they were going to be what they became. They just were thinking about chips, and it wasn't about AI in the early days. It was not an AI company. So like, you kind of, when you're climbing a mountain, you kind of have to take each step every day. You probably heard this. People talk about like Kaizen. Maybe you haven't. It's doing one thing every day to make an impact, essentially. It's at a high level. Like, it's do one thing today that'll make the company better. The question for me is like, every day, it's like, what is going to make the biggest impact on the company? And how do I get that one thing done today that'll help the team and the company? I think a lot of the companies that are out there are built this way, that have like endured over time. It's not like Netflix knew that they were going to be online streaming. They knew, I don't know if you know the history of Netflix. They didn't even start with DVDs. Like, they had to get to this path. They went down this path, and they're like, DVDs are the answer. Let's start shipping DVDs. Okay, oh my God, let's try streaming. Like, they didn't see it from day one, but it was like a process of refinement over time. And you would have never known that, like, for anyone who like knows what VHS is and like videotapes, that not everyone knows, but Blockbuster was their big competitor, where like they both like had DVDs and you could rent a DVD. Blockbuster was on a path to crush Netflix. They were going to kill Netflix. They had a CEO who was on a mission to create streaming. By Netflix's luck, the CEO left Blockbuster. And then Blockbuster immediately lost their way and just said, we're going to just do the brick and mortar, double down and just have DVDs in stores, because that's how we make all of our money. Like, why would we do streaming? Like, and then suddenly Netflix had their chance. So it's like, there's this weird dynamic. I heard one entrepreneur say this to me, and it stuck in my brain. It's like 60% luck, 40% determination. As crazy as that sounds. So like, from day one, I was just like thinking about it. I'm like, what's a space that we could work in for a long time? And we had some crazy ideas before this idea, like, and we didn't go with this idea, but like, basically like death care, completely different idea. Writing ideas down. Death care was like a way to help people that had like disastrous loss in their life, create a better experience for them in society, because people don't look at that part of society much. I mean, that was like the broad idea of that idea. And something about it scared me, where I was like, I don't know if the market's big enough. I don't know if there's a real market there. My co-founder was really passionate. Vinay, my one co-founder, he was super passionate about going into this field. And I'm like, I wanted to do it, but something was like telling me, be careful. Now, hindsight's 2020. I could kick myself. There may be like really amazing startups doing this idea, and there are a few that came out of YC in the last batch. This is literally our original idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or not, because I never went that path. So I'm going down this path, and I'm like, take it day by day, and let's see what kind of change we can make in this industry with like really revolutionary technology.
When it comes to like picking an area that you could stay excited about for a long time, like how do you know? Like, it's so hard to look ahead. You worked on Dr. Chrono for 14 plus years. Like, how were you able to stay excited? How did you know, like, oh, this is something I can persevere. This is something I can continue working on until I get lucky, until the opportunity comes. Like, how did you know that was the space? And like, how can other founders who are looking to start their first company know that they can stay excited about this thing?
I think it's you may not always be excited about what you're working on. Like there's days when you just want to run away and like hide.
Absolutely.
But there are industries where like you feel like something's off for you. And I'll give you an example for me where things were like off. Before I started Dr. Chrono with my co-founder in Dr. Chrono, he wanted to really start a gaming company. And it just doesn't excite me for some reason. Like, and you have to like go into like your lower level trust systems. This is very strange to talk about. It's like you get these senses, and a lot of people ignore this, where you kind of have to trust whatever your body is telling you. And like something about gaming scares me because I feel like it's a very transient thing. And I'm trying to articulate what I mean. And I love games, and I think people that build games, it's amazing. I think it's honestly a great industry to be in, but it's an industry where you either have a hit or you don't. And even if you have a hit, the longevity of the hit is like fleeting. It may be a few years. It might be 5 years. It might be 10 years. It might be 1 year. It might be 6 months. Pokemon Go. Gone? Is it done? Like, is it like a thing? Like, is it out there? Something about gaming like is unsettling to me when building a business. And I don't like the reset. Like, we need to do another game. Like, this game didn't work, reset, we need to do another game. And it feels very much like the movie industry, which you're starting from like zero essentially to try to get people to be excited about a movie. And I feel like I want to de-risk, and de-risk means compounding growth on an existing product. Zynga. I don't know if Zynga's doing well. They have like a pool of games, you know, and it's like a book of business, like gaming. For me, I like compounding companies in the sense, like I really like what Facebook did. Again, social networks they're similar to gaming. You have to keep people's attention. I like what the banking industry did, which is, I guess these are things that like are part of your daily life, and it kind of integrates in a way that like it's useful to you on a daily basis. It's not something that may just you watch it and you're done. How do you layer in more value every single day onto an existing product that keeps people engaged and coming back? And you have to refine it. Again, the software industry, what I'm in, it is very like fickle, but gaming is even more brutal. I'd rather de-risk and build like a B2B business or a B2C business that isn't so fickle. And I could be totally wrong. I'm not in the game, but this is the way I perceive it, and I'm trusting my gut.
Yeah, I get it. Is this connected to like your desire to build lasting companies that perhaps like in the movie or the gaming industry, like having to continually like come up with like, you know, the hits, if you will, like perhaps aren't building something as like with a stronger foundation that could have like more lasting impact? Is that perhaps a part of why you feel that way?
Yeah, I would say so. But I would also say stability is better than instability. Like, you want more revenue over time. I feel like with the gaming industry, it's like, boom, you have success, and then people just get bored, they lose interest. Like, something is unsettling to me about that, the longevity of a like business that will continue compounding. And I think Jeff Bezos, like, smart guy, he's really smart at like he's thinking along the lines of the way I'm thinking. It's like he saw books as just a conduit to more products. You know, he's like, I'm going to start with books because everybody loves books. I see the internet scaling at like a rapid pace, and it's not going to stop. So the internet itself is like an engine to keep going faster and faster and faster. But if books don't sell, I built the product to sell other products on it. And I think that's a really smart way to think about it, where it's not as unsettling as the movie industry. You know, there's these hit businesses, some of the tokens, like crypto tokens, like whatever, you know, they have this like NFTs, those sorts of things. Not that those are bad. It's just, for me as an entrepreneur, I feel like I like this long-term strategy of one thing that we could like continually refine.
Do you think that Jeff Bezos like knew he was going to go like past books one day? Do you think like when he started selling like the first book online, that was part of the game plan? I'm starting with books today, and then I'm going to sell so much other stuff one day.
I think he was very clear that like books were just the beginning. I think his mindset was always that way, which was, this is not a one-hit wonder. It's not like, his mind was very much racing, like, how do we get more users to buy more stuff on here? Because the internet's growing so fast. We need to capture market. and like everybody will see it. But I'm building the platform, not really the items. Other people were putting their inventory and whatnot, but I think he saw the software itself as the core thing to sell other stuff.
Yeah. Okay. What were the books for Dr. Chrono?
The books for Dr. Chrono.
What was that first little bit?
For me, I just saw, medical records were something that were not digitized. It was just not a digitized thing. That's our way in, because doctors are just using paper. And this is back in 2007, 2008. Like, I had family members go to the doctor. I'd go to the doctor and they would just kind of ruffle through like paper and be like, when's your next tetanus shot? I remember having this conversation with the doctor and he's like, I'll have to look it up. And then he ran over to like a corner of a room. He literally had files and he would just like ruffle through them and he'd be like, I don't really know, but I'm just going to give you a tetanus shot. Whatever, like, that sounds great. And that was the experience I had. And, my parents, same thing. My brother, sister, same thing. So I'm like, there's something there. And I want to go that way, and we'll figure things out as we go down that path. And it was the paper that really bothered me. It sounds crazy today, but it was a paper-driven industry back then. Like, doctors would just have piles of paper, and like you'd go to the doctor. It still is that way today. There's a lot of paper in like the medical industry, so 100-fold than what it is today. Like, it was bad. Like, everything was paper back then.
In your journey with Dr. Chrono, like, what was the closest you came to giving up? Like, where you're like, this, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, was there a point like that or several points like that?
I mean, this goes for any startup. And if any startup founder says it's not true, they're lying. I think there's hard times in startups. And I think every startup founder goes through this psychological warfare against themselves. And I think this is just what happens, where you ask yourself, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, how do I continue on this path? So I think every founder goes through this like momentous stress in their life. I view it like this, like, it's very stressful, but it's like, if you're driving down like a highway at 100 miles an hour, right? This is literally how I think about it. And you have two friends who said that they could build wings onto the car. And in about like 1 hour, you're going to fall off a cliff. And your friends are climbing out there, like putting the wings on. And you're driving 100 miles an hour towards this, end of this cliff. And do you believe your friends can build the wings? Or do you stop the car immediately? That's the psychological game that every founder goes through, where they're like, can we do this? And, everybody is kind of relying on everybody else to like get the car to become a plane. Cliff could be anything. It could be bankruptcy. It could be personal failure. It could be, you don't have the money to do something that you need to, like a surgery. Like, I guess that's where like that stressor comes in. And like, some people may not have as bad of cliffs. Maybe it's not, but some people have like disastrous, like, my wife is going to leave me, I mean, I can tell you some hard times like that I personally went through, had nothing to do with the company. You have family members and you have like all these people in your life. But this, for me, a dark time, I would say, was one of my really close friends was working with me, like super close. We were really good friends, and he passed away. And I'm like dealing with that stress, and I'm like, this is horrible. Like, I'm like processing it. And then I got a phone call, like, my dad has brain cancer. And then I'm like, oh no, I don't have like life savings. How am I going to help him? And then I'm like helping my dad, my friend passed away, and my cat dies. I don't know what happened, but he was out and about and my cat passes away. So I'm like dealing with all this like stress, and I'm like, you have to like still build a company at the same time. So it's like, and then my dad passes away, right? And I'm like dealing with that, building this company. And then my mom passes away. And then my uncle passes away, all within a year. And I would say that was a rough time, because I was like, how do I do this? Like, why am I doing this to myself? Because I wasn't like wealthy. I came from like small beginnings, right? Like, I didn't have wealth. I didn't come from wealth. You want to be there for those people, like during those hard times, like when they're going through these moments. And it's like operating a business, helping your family, not having like much money. I would say psychologically, if I worked for Google, it would have been easier, right? At Google, I'm sure they take care of employees for that. So there are benefits to being an employee that I think employees, like, they get these perks, like whatever it is, like get that time off that you need. When you're building a business, you don't get that time off. Like that's the reality of building a business. Like a lot of people would just fold and crush and like fall and be like, screw it, I can't build it anymore. I think, a lot of founders there were really like talking through a lot of the issues that they were having, and a lot of them had to do just very different issues. Building a company is not, it's easy in some senses. It's really hard when personal life is like also like battling for that time and those resources in your life.
Yeah, I mean, like in a vacuum, like starting a startup sounds like a great idea, but like when real life comes at you and like, you have to take care of your own health or your loved ones, or, can't take the space you need for yourself to like, recover from grief, right? Or go through your grief. Like that's the part I don't think anybody tells you about before you start a company, that you really can't get that space. You really, like, your identity and the company's identity sort of become merged in like a big way, and like you can't really step away.
Exactly. I mean, you could, but like most companies fail. The reality is if you step away like for a long period, it will just die. And you think, oh, it'll be fine. It won't. You lose that momentum. People like look at you and they see that like momentum lost. Like sometimes they survive, but I would say that that's the more less normal. Every single company is a group of people, and it's like they're all going through their own personal issues, but at the same time, can you create a culture that creates like greatness? And like every year, Apple comes out with a new iPhone, right? Every year, they put this huge pressure on themselves to like reinvent what the iPhone is and put it out there and like show new software on the iPhone. Sometimes like creating cultures like that, where there's these like pressure moments, is really good, because then you're striving towards that goal to get whatever that is, like to that goal.
Yeah. So the founders who are about to give up, who are like in that rut and are not sure if they can keep going, like what worked for you in sticking with it? What would you tell them to like to help them keep going?
I guess one of the things is like, you're given this opportunity, like don't up. I mean, if you say you have $2 million in revenue, whatever it is, and then like you hit a bump in the road, like whatever, your husband is going to leave you because you're working on your startup. Like, I hate to say it, that's like part of the reality. And it's like, you could quit and go take care of your husband and like fix that relationship, or you could build the business that has $2 million. And these are like hard things that actually happen in real relationships, where like people are like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, you're only given so many chances. In my mind, like you live so long, you live 80 years, 100 years. Like if you've gotten to $2 million in revenue, if you've gotten to $500,000 in revenue, like, do you want to peel back and like give it up? I mean, that's one piece of it. Can you truly work for someone else? And this is for some entrepreneurs out there. I think some of them are so, I've met some entrepreneurs who cannot work for other people at all. And I think there's a certain set of entrepreneurs who can work for people, and there's a certain set of entrepreneurs who can't. You have to be really realistic about that. And like, if you cannot work for other people, don't give up. Like, it's just, the reality is you have to keep going down this path. And maybe your relationship does fall apart. Like, I'm throwing this out there because this is what literally happens. Like, someone's husband is like, hey, I'm not happy with all the hours you're putting in. So there's extreme moments in like every person's life where they're like confronted over and over again. Maybe you have like 1 month in the bank of, for the company, or 3 months in the bank for the company. How do you get past that? Like, the reality is most companies have these disastrous moments where they're like, I only have 3 months of revenue left. What the hell am I doing with my time? And I do talk to entrepreneurs. Like, over the last month, I spoke to one entrepreneur who was in that situation. I mean, I asked them this question: would you go work for Google? That was the first thing I asked them, and they said no. So I'm like, well, you got to figure out a way out of this. Then you have to like work your way through this. I mean, you heard about like burn your bridges, right? Burn your boats. Burn your boat.
Leave no option to return.
If you don't have a life savings and you have nothing to lose, you don't have a mortgage, those people are, they have a higher risk tolerance. And for me, like when I first started my first company, I intentionally kept my life, simple. But the reality is, some of my friends were like getting married. Some of my friends were like having like great families. Some of my friends like had a lot of life savings. Like they had like, I'd be like, wow, how did you save all that money? He's like, I worked for 5 years. I'm like, man, what am I doing? Like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm ruining my life. Like, but whatever, like this is the path I chose, and I'm gonna burn my bridges and burn my boats. Sorry, burn my boats, and I'm gonna go this path. And like, if I don't have a life savings, so be it. Literally, I'm like, it's if I don't have a life savings from the outcome of this, but I'm gonna work hard enough to try to make that outcome where I can have a life savings from this. That's the mindset you have to be in. I don't know. I also think anxiety is like good for founders. That as it sounds, I think it creates a founder who's hyper alert and thinking about the business all of the time. So like that stress, it's not good to be in that stress, but it does create progress. So like people are like, work-life balance. I'm like, work-life balance is great, but stress is good. It creates momentum when you're using that stress to like move the company forward. A lot of founders don't even sleep. I mean, but this is me. This is like advice for me. I'm just telling you, like, no like perfect map. Every founder is different. They operate very differently. Everybody operates at a different level and they build their business in a different way and their team works different than them. And it's like, this is just the way that I think about it. But
you mentioned having a culture of greatness in your team. I've heard this from so many different founders. I have a great team. You know, we're always striving to be the best. Like, we're building a culture of greatness. Like, what does that mean to you? And how do you know if you have it?
Greatness is good and all, but you need people to use the product. Like, that's number one. But then there's like a second order of magnitude, which is like a wow factor in the product itself. Teams and products, I think the team creates the product, but the product itself has to be the result of a great team. A great team is one that works well together with limited resources to get extraordinary things done in a small amount of time. What Sam Altman did, like in the early days, like AI, like no one's going to use that. He started this in like 2016, you know, OpenAI, and trying to figure out how to like create an AI product for people. They really didn't have that many resources, right? They really like, if it didn't work, it would be dead. But the team was savvy enough and figured out a lot of ways to get this thing off the ground before it died.
Speaking of Sam Altman, like, you guys were like the first health tech company like in YC, which is crazy to think about, in the Winter 11 batch. So this was in the early days of YC. How was that like? How has YC changed? Like, how have things gone since then?
We were the first healthcare company in YC. There was another company called Comprehend in our batch, but we were like the first two real healthcare companies in Y Combinator. And you know, this is back in 2000. I'll reverse a little bit, but
Sure.
How we got into YC, and then I'll talk through like what the experience was.
I'm sure a lot of founders out there, I'm sure, want to know like what the sauce is, how to get into YC, which is like a lower acceptance rate than Harvard.
I mean, the first time we got into YC, the first time I got into Y Combinator, I think it was they were not who they are today, right? Like, it wasn't this big known brand like Harvard. I think it's actually a brand now. It's huge. It's like everybody knows about Y Combinator. This is like 2000, 2008, 2009, 2010, kind of heard about them. And part of it was the articles online from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator. So he wrote a bunch of articles about like entrepreneurship and like how to build a startup. You know, me and my co-founder were in New York City at the time, and we were renting 2 desks. My co-founder was very passionate about Y Combinator. And, you know, part of what I spoke about before is like, I'd say one of my superpowers was like just getting people to like listen to me, at least for a few minutes. I emailed the founder of Y Combinator directly. I said, hey, we're building this company. We have traction. It's game changer. We would love to talk. And he emailed me back and he said, no, I'm in California. You know, for me, that wasn't a no. So I emailed him back and I said, well, we're working out of this like a little accelerator. It wasn't an accelerator. It was like a little like startup room, and we'd love somebody come here and just like talk to us. What convinced them to even take the time is I told them that there were a few startups in this like little building. It was 3 companies, like just sprinkled. That was it, 3 companies. So I made it seem bigger. Maybe I don't know. I don't even know what it was, but he said like, I will send Alexis Ohamian. He's in the area. He'll swing by the office and he'll give all the startups a talk. And Alexis comes into the building, founder of Reddit, and he's, Reddit wasn't that big back. Reddit wasn't that big. It wasn't like what it is today. And he gave us and the other 2 startups like a little pitch talk, and we had enough time. Like, Alexis kind of sat there with us for probably an hour and just saw like, oh, these 2 founders have no funding. They've been working on this for a few years. They're actually building something significant. We built the first medical record on the iPad in history, and we had users using the product, and he really got excited. Like, it was just, he saw the passion in us, because whether Y Combinator investor or not, I felt like we were going to build the business. And he saw that. Like, he's like, okay, I didn't know anything about Y Combinator really, except these articles, right? So I'm like, okay. And he's like, you could fly to California and you can meet Paul Graham. And I'm like, okay, I'm calculating my life savings, and I had, it's like $35,000 in the bank, my personal life savings. And I'm like, I'll have to pay for a flight to California. And I'm like, that my burn rate will go up a little bit. Me and my co-founder spend the money, we buy the tickets. We first go to this thing called Startup School, because it timed well. It was this thing called Startup School, and it was really good. I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, there's other people like us. Like, I didn't talk to entrepreneurs. We didn't talk to people. There was no entrepreneur community like that. Like, it was just a couple of people hanging out and building weird companies. And essentially people thought we were jobless. Like, oh, we didn't have jobs. Those guys, they don't have a job.
What are these guys doing? Like, how did you know you weren't crazy without like seeing other people doing things like you?
This is something you trust in your gut. You self-reflect, right? Where people are, and are they truly happy in life, and are they liking what they're doing? And I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone. Like, it wasn't like what they were doing wasn't for me. It was like, go get a job, work for a large company, get a salary, find a partner, get a mortgage. Like, that was like, I was running that through my head, and I'm like, this sounds fun. I'm like, I need to have fun while I'm working. Like, I want to do something that's impactful. You know, I met all these people at the startup school. I'm like, oh my God, they're like me. They're all like thinking the same way, and they want to like do something unique, and they're passionate. And they want to like build something. And I'm like, this investor seems like they're good. Other investors I met were, you know, they didn't have that. Like, there were a few that like I thought were smart people, but they didn't have this energy in this room from all these passionate founders. And then I'm like, we have to like pitch this really well. You know, I talked to my co-founder, and I'm like, hey, I really, you know, let's get them as an investor. I kind of went all in, and I'm like, well, we're going to get them. I think my co-founder was really, we worked well together in this way. We locked ourselves in a room for like 10 hours. We practiced a pitch when we were going to meet Paul Graham in person. You know, we go to Y Combinator in Mountain View, the little building, and we walk in, and there's a line of all these terrified founders like that are going to pitch this guy to see if they can get investment from him. And we go into the room, and we kind of just went into that pitch that we pitched 10 hours. We just went straight into it. I thought we didn't get them as an investor, because they're like, okay, thank you so much. Next. It was like a casting call. Okay, we'll go back to New York City and we'll build it. And that night, Paul Graham calls us and says, hey, you want in or out? Are you in? And, you know, like, me and my co-founder are on the phone, and it's like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. and late at night. And I'm like, yes. I look at my co-founder, and he's like, yes. And, you know, I was making sure he was aligned with it, and we both said yes to it. He's like, all right, you're going to come to California for 3 months, and we're going to give you a little bit of money, and we'll just put you through our program. And I'm like, that sounds great. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, back then was very involved. Jessica Livingston and Paul Graham were hugely involved. Paul Buchheit, hugely involved. Gary Tan was just hired in. Sam Altman was just hired in. So, you know, those are the partners that we worked with. That was the partners. Like, those are the primary people we went to for help in the early days. So, you know, we got into Y Combinator, and it felt like college, because there was just an energy of hope. Like, we're going to do something big, and, you know, all work well together. And Paul Graham just would get his hands dirty and help us with everything, which was great. So it was a really unscalable way. Yeah, he was literally helping us whenever we asked for help. And back then, you could just book as much time with Paul Graham as you could. And I think we booked, I don't know, like 50 hours, maybe not 50, but a lot of time with Paul Graham. And we would do this thing like it was like a walk. We would basically go for like a walk around the Y Combinator area and just like kind of just talk about the business and kind of get his thoughts. And Sam Altman we would talk to, and then Gary. We always went to Gary for design questions. I'd always like ask him about like, what do you think about this? What are we doing there? But, you know, they were pretty honest. The thing about them is they were just so helpful in any way possible that it left a good taste. And it was just always a good experience, and like they were just aligned with us.
Yeah, working with PG directly must have been amazing. Like having all that space and time with him, like he's such a legend. And Yeah, it sounds like you guys got a lot out of YC first time around. Would you say the second time around you guys got a lot out of it as well? It was quite different, I imagine, the second time.
Well, the first time there wasn't really software. Like there was a little bit of software. So like when we did demo day, it was literally in a room with people and then you have to run up to them to get their business card. You know, the first time around with Y Combinator, I remember thinking, I'm going to stay here longer than any founder in this room and get as many business cards. Literally stayed there till like, I don't know, it was like 1 a.m. It was like 11 or 1 a.m. It was really late. And I'm just like, all right, all the other founders are gone. There's one investor left. I'm going to go talk to him. He did invest. He's like, you're the last founder here. I'm going to invest. And he did. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such strange reasoning, but that's great. And that was like really, yeah. So sometimes it's just last man standing. But, you know, I had a stack of business cards and you had to like go through them, look at this phone number and be like, all right, I'm going to call this guy. So that's old YC. That was like, the YC partners, you know, Jessica, Paul, and all the other partners would convince the investors to come to YC, sit in a room for hours of their time. And they had like heavy hitters like Hermant. You know, I don't know if you know Hermant from General Catalyst. He runs all of General Catalyst. So he was there. All these great investors were just in this room, like amazing people like Sequoia. And they were just all sitting there, like looking at the founders pitch one by one. So the stress level was also higher in the sense like if you say something wrong in a room full of these people staring at you, the pressure was just intense. I mean, you went through YC this time.
Yeah.
I don't know what you thought about like the demo day online.
It's insane. The weight of the moment. We were a COVID batch, winter 21. So it was a little different, but still like had to, you know, perform live and had to be ready. And thankfully we had software. we didn't have to deal with any physical business cards. So yeah, it's definitely changed quite a bit since winter 11.
Yeah.
But I noticed that when you talk about the hard times in the startup journey, you have such certainty like in your like destiny of like success. Like how do you come about this mindset where like you like is it like a form of manifestation you have? Like what is it that gives you such high conviction that you are going to persevere and succeed in like what you set out to do?
I mean, I just think it's taking it day by day and not overwhelming yourself. Like, how do I create the next NVIDIA? Like, if you do that, you're kind of psychologically like wasting. You're just like, it's not a good mindset to say like, I'm gonna build the next NVIDIA. Like, if you run around saying that to yourself, you feel like a liar. It's what can I do today? I'm gonna go back to this to like make the company better for tomorrow. I view it as like creating like, you ever see those like beautiful swords or like whatever it is, like a beautiful car? It's like, these things are not made in a day. And the reality is like, you have to like understand, you have to take it day by day. Like if you're thinking you're going to like create, I don't know, like Tesla in a day, it's like, you're going to psych yourself out. I think for me, it's just a process. And I have my days where I'm like, what am I doing? But at the same time, like, what's the inverse? Like what's on the other side of that? Like go work for someone else?
I think that will resonate with a lot of founders. Like, they don't see themselves working for somebody else.
It's one of those things where, you know, you're going to die. I'm going to go back to this. Like, you're going to die. Like, we're all going to, like, not be here in 100 years. So, like, tolerance levels, like, of, you know, if you have a family and you have, like, 6 kids and you have a really great family and you have a mortgage, like, maybe don't do it. Like there's moments in your life where like you gather like a family, like that's a scenario where like maybe don't do it. Like I hate to say it, it's like the risk is really high, like the failure rate is really high. If you are determined and you feel passionate, like not everyone in the world is fortunate enough to even be able to do what we're doing. Like, you know, other parts of the world, they don't even have this opportunity. So like why not try? I don't know.
I know I'm totally on the same page. And like, I call my parents like every 2 or 3 weeks and I like thank them for immigrating to America. They came as like Jewish refugees from Ukraine. And like, I'm like so grateful, especially like as I'm traveling and I see like just how much we have here in terms of opportunity, but also like the way that the culture here nurtures entrepreneurship, like individualism and ambition, and, you know, that it's incredible. And I'm like so grateful to be here in the US. And like also when it comes to timing, like started this company like 5 years ago when I was 20. So like I have the luxury of not having a wife and kids and mortgages and huge bills. So yeah, timing I think is huge. Like what do you say to the founders out there that have a lot to lose, have a, like a spouse that's depending on them, debt or mortgages, kids, like who really don't know if they can afford to take the risk, like, and they want to do it, but like how can they pull off that balancing act? Do you have any words of inspiration for them other than maybe don't? It isn't for everybody. I agree with you there, but for those who have the determination to do it anyways, like what would you tell them?
I mean, it's risk versus reward. Like, if you work on this business, you may not have a life savings. You may work till you're 90. Like, if it fails, say you're 45 and you work on it and you're 55 and you don't have a life savings, you're going to work till you're 90. And it's a risk versus reward game for everyone involved, right? Like, everybody's situation is different. If you have a sick family member and you need to support them, it may not be a good time. If you have like, really young kids and like you just feel like guts telling you don't have the time, don't do it. Have you ever heard of the musician Bon Iver? He's just one of these musicians out there. He just came out with an album yesterday, and his very first album, he locked himself in a cabin in Wisconsin in the middle of nowhere to create this first album. And it was a really good album. He had the time and the clearness and the space to explore different ways to like work on that music. If you start to collect things, like I have 2 dogs now. I love my dogs. But as you collect responsibility in life, like you may not have the resources or the time to build it. And it's really a question for you if you want to take that leap. And if your partner's not on board, maybe they're not the right partner. Maybe that's a whole other issue. But if you care about them and you want to be with them, and they're like, you can't do this. We're $20,000 in debt. You have to look at everything and kind of figure out when is the right time. And for me, like when I started my first company, I was in a situation where like I saved enough money. I calculated like a 2-year burn with 0 income. And I'm like, I will live off $50,000 for 2 years. It's $25,000 a year. I will live with roommates. I will not go on vacations. I will live in a small little place, and I will push as far as I can until I'm on the brink of bankruptcy personally. And that was like my thought process for the first company. But I didn't have a wife. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have a car payment. I didn't have a mortgage, right? Like, so I was ready to take that plunge, knowing that I may come out of the other side with nothing. 15 years later, 20 years later, there's different takes on it. One is the positive spin is like you believe in the idea so much and you want to work on this idea, like it's worth the risk and you believe it's going to work. I mean, that's one way to think about it. Another is they want to get rich. Like a lot of founders don't talk about it, but they just want to become really wealthy. And that's okay. Like that's a good reason to go into it if you think you could work on it 10 years and you're passionate about it. Another is you have a lot of dysfunctional founders who can't get jobs in the world, and then they realize that they can create value outside of the structures of like large organizations. So they start small and then they build and build and build. I mean, Steve Jobs, he couldn't get a job. He would walk around barefoot. He didn't take showers. There's no right or wrong way to like become an entrepreneur. Also, I think that there's really nice founders and there's determined founders, and then there's founders who are really aggressive and mean. Like there's a spectrum. I don't think that there's one size fits all, and people kind of cram like the one size fits all founder. You can still build a really valuable, enduring, massively successful business without being like this one founder that's successful.
So I'd love to talk about like building a lasting company, because you've talked about how like all companies die. How do you make a company that truly lasts, and how do you know that you're working on something that like is meaningful and worthwhile? And then maybe I'd love to connect that with like your greater life purpose, like the purpose that you've selected for yourself or has evolved, or you might see it intrinsically evident. I'd love to hear how those connect, how you found those.
Again, like I said, it's like 60% luck, 40% determination. I think that's a piece of it. Like this company, I think it was the energy of the people. If we could build something that can go into every business in the world, that's exciting. Like there's something there. And that's like a big mission that like really excites me. Everybody like I'm working with, everybody's learning every day from each other. I think that's really exciting. Like also, I'm learning a lot from my co-founders and they're learning a lot from me. And we're all kind of like gelling and there's this energy. And I really like a mission driven life. Like if you don't have a mission in your life, like what are you going to do? I don't know. And this is just like the way I operate. I think, you know, my wife talks about it. She's like, you just do this. And I'm like, I could just not do it and like go to a beach and enjoy life. But that gets boring like really fast. Like it's not really what I want to do. Like I think being in like the game of business is really fun because you get to learn and it's not a lose-lose situation. It's like a win-win where like a lot of people win together. It's so fun. It's like really fun when everybody's like working well together and enjoying it. And like you create business partnerships and everybody like everyone says like building a startup is so horrible. I'm like, is it though? Like there's really hard jobs out there. There's really other hard jobs out there that people like, they suffer. I look at like people building like skyscrapers and like, you know, those construction workers out there day in and day out. I'm like, building a startup is a fun strategy. It's like strategy. It's like, how do we take all of the money we have and make it like work for us in a really positive way? When you look at construction workers, I'm like, that's a really grueling, stressful job. I'm like, thank God those people opted into doing that because it's a really hard job. And it's like, it's a job I wouldn't want to do. And I think that's another thing. It's like you look at all of these different paths in your life and you're like, do I want to do this? No. Do I want to do that? No. Would I be happy doing this? Yes. But this has problems. And then you kind of like figure out for yourself. I do think that the world glorifies entrepreneurship. It's not like all fun and glitz and glory. It's literally day in and day out, like sitting in front of your computer and doing phone calls and like working with people. And it's not an overnight success. People get in their head like, oh, a year from now, this is going to be so big and I'm going to have all these users. And they view it as like almost like the new rock stars. I'm like, it's not that. It's a grind in its own way and it's like stressful in its own way. But I guess the people that go in with it, with that mindset, like they're going to fail because it's not what they're expecting. Like I kind of went into it knowing like it takes time and you have to like put a lot of energy into it and you have to like figure things out. So
yeah, it's definitely a grind and it's definitely not the romanticized thing you see nowadays has sort of become trendy, especially for young people to try to get into entrepreneurship. But after like your first company, like you could have become a huge VC. You had like an amazing exit, a lot of press, a lot of attention. Why did you come back to the founder path? Like, what was it that drove you to that? Like, what compelled you to do so? You could have done so many different things. You could have, you know, become a beach bum and sipped mimosas, right? What pulled you this way?
I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know how VCs operate. I mean, who knows? Maybe down the road I would do that. But, you know, being a VC is very different than being an entrepreneur. I think, first of all, like 90% of VC firms fail. I don't know if people know that. So you are trying to figure out who are the best companies to invest in. And, you know, you're trying to pick the best. You are de-risked in a way because you have maybe 10 companies or 30 companies or 200 companies or 500 companies that you invested in. So your chances of success are higher, you know, and they also get like, I don't know if you know what 2 and 20 is. That's the way that VCs operate. They get 2% management fees every year. So if they raise $100 million, they get $2 million to operate their VC firm. And then they get something called 20% carry, which is basically any exit that happens, they get 20% of the exit amount of equity that they hold in that company. I mean, honestly, like being a VC sounds like a really great gig. I don't think it's a bad gig. I'm like, it's not a bad job. I actually think it's a really fun job. You get to talk to entrepreneurs. I mean, for me, I know I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and I felt like it was just a really, you get your hands, you know, into a company and you get to like work with the team a lot. VCs don't. Yeah, I mean, if you have 50 companies, 100 companies, like you can only do so much. And it's just the way that that's structured like a lot of the time, right? Like you can't help all of your companies.
So I know that you do some investing. With your investor hat on, how do you decide which companies to invest in?
I mean, for me, it's at the really early stage. Like I wouldn't invest in like a late stage company. I think it's just founders. Honestly, I talk to the founder, look at the idea. I know the risk going into it. It's really high risk. So I would love it if the companies work out. But at the same time, I know the founders are hopefully like trying their best and trying to make it work. But At the same time, it's not like I'm going to be angry if it fails. So it's the same, startups are hard. And it's like, if you're going to invest in startups, your chances of success are very low. Like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% will make it. 95% of the money you put in may not be there that you put in. But if one of those companies has a big outcome, then you're in a really, you can make your money back.
With all the AI hype going on, like how do investors and founders both know, like if a startup worthy problem should be approached with AI or not, or like a more traditional route to like solving a problem? Like how do we know if like there's a problem to be solved with AI or not? With when now like everyone seems to be wanting to throw AI and Chat GPT wrappers at everything.
I mean, if you look at it, like they're building like nuclear power plants now to support the new infrastructure. All these different businesses are doing that, and they're massive server farms that are being built out. And I don't know what the outcome of it's going to be, but I can tell you that like everything that's software driven will have some sort of AI in it at some point. You have to pick the winners, but it's also like the internet, right? Like when the internet first came out, they didn't know who was going to be the winners. So like Amazon was one amongst many. People thought Amazon might fail. People thought pets.com might succeed. You don't really know. But in the long run, a company is a sports team, right? So like you kind of pick your sports teams and you say, I believe in this company. I'm going to invest in this sports team because they seem to have the most energy, intelligence, emotional intelligence. Like they also have like stuff going on and they seem like the right team. So that, that's how people would invest. So do you invest everything in AI? The answer is no. There's good businesses outside of AI. Like clearly there's a lot of like areas that people can go into. I just think AI is going to change the world at a really fast rate. So the opportunities there are unknown and people get excited by like the upside of unknown.
I wanted to ask, life post exit, you had like a hugely successful exit with your first company. Like, how does the math change, the dynamics change? Like, did you take some space for yourself between companies? Like, how did your view post exit on like your life, your purpose, your work change? I'm sure it can't be the same as it was before.
I took about a year off. Essentially, but I was just really trying to figure out like what to do next. Like you kind of think about different things, different areas. Like I thought about VCs a lot, like becoming a venture capitalist, doing all different types of startups, maybe being an advisor, maybe just being an angel investor. Nobody has like a right like path per se, but I would say like for me, it was just taking that year off was good. I drove across country twice. It was a lot of fun, honestly, like just seeing the United States. So I drove every state and kind of experienced each state. And just honestly, I spent time like catching up with a lot of friends also, which was really nice. Like I think part of like the downside of doing my startup was I just didn't have time for spending time with like people I cared about, like friends from college, like friends from high school, like all of that. So it was a lot of catching up to do. One thing founders should do is just try not to disconnect too much and try not to go too deep in your startup, because you want your friends to remember you. You want your family to be like, oh, you want to like keep that relationship there. Every founder kind of has that dilemma. It's like, could work this Friday. Oh, but my friends are going out, I opted to work on the Friday, but once I took time off, I was just spending time with friends and just catching up with a lot of people. And it's really nice because I feel like I've rebonded with a lot of people from my past. And it's really important, I think, just for everybody. Like, there's people in your life, sure, that like you don't have the time to talk to right now, but like hopefully they'll just keep in touch with them, like reach out to the people you care about. Some people are really privileged or they had really good lives. Not everybody has like trauma. Every founder is so different. Like you're going to have like some people that have like disastrous trauma for them to start a company. Camp YC together, and I'm like, everybody has trauma. I'm like, I don't know if that's exactly true. I think some people just genuinely just wanted to start a company and they had a really good life and they just see it as like a path for them. There's always like a flip case. I think for me, part of it was maybe trauma. Like my parents like didn't have much, right? So like for me, I was like, how do I make our lives like a little more secure and safe? And I saw what my parents had, and my parents both, my dad worked for the government, which was great. So he had security, but we always struggled because it was like they don't pay that well at the government, right? So like, and he had 3 kids, so he was always like trying to figure out how to have enough to support all of his kids, which he did a really good job. He honestly like taught me a lot. Work hard. He's like, just work hard. That was the ethic that he left for me, and I'm like, got it. I'll work really hard. And so part of the reason why I worked so hard on my startup is because of my father. That's not quite trauma. That's just like him showing a way for me to like be. But that, but I also saw the way that he suffered by working for the government because he didn't make a lot of money. The government's great. They do provide benefits and they do provide a lot of like resources, but like you don't get ahead. You know what I mean? Working for like the mail, in the United States Postal Service or like as an elevator mechanic or like in the military, you're not going to come out and like have ultra wealth. Right. So like I saw that. I'm like, oh, he struggled his whole life, but he was taken care of in a safe way. I'm like, what if I go this path that's way less known? Who knows what's there? Like, and that's honestly one of the reasons why I did it. I'm like, who knows? Like, what's this path? Let me look on this path and see what I can accomplish.
In speaking to some great coaches the last few years, I've learned that one of the most valuable things you can learn is not like the facts or the specific suggestions or advice. It's actually the frameworks. Are there any frameworks that your father or Paul Graham imparted on you that have been instrumental in the success that you've had that you could share with young founders early in their journey?
I call them like axioms of like truth. People get really rattled by competitors. You have a competitor and a competitor raises, I don't know, $400 million to your company and they're a competitor to you. That scares a lot of founders away. And I think that's the wrong thinking is, oh, our competitor has ... we're going to die. Like a lot of founders get really rattled by that. And I think like doing that too often will like put you in a psychological space where like you will be self-defeated. So like don't look at your competitors as much as others are looking at their competitors. I mean, an example is like Dig and Reddit. Like Reddit was the underdog. Dig was the cool company. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but they had a lot of funding. People would all go to Dig. It like would work really well. And it just was awesome. And they had a lot of funding and like they had the cool employees, they had everything going for them. And then like poof, like it all fell apart very quickly at Dig. Somehow Reddit just like would just keep going and going and going. And it built momentum in that company. And then somehow they got all the users like piling in, like using the company. So like for me, like one of the axioms is like, don't worry about competitors. Like another one is like, try to be in good standing with your co-founders. Always try to have like a good standing with your co-founder. And that means like, if they want the button to be blue and you know that this is going to like damage your relationship, do you really care if the button's green? Fight the right battles. A lot of people fight the wrong battles. And I'm like, I'm saying this for myself. Like I need to do this also on a weekly basis, a daily basis to like just pick the right battles to fight as you build your company because your co-founder's in it with you for the long haul. Like make sure you're taking care of them, like making sure them feel like they're empowered, make sure they feel you're empowered. Like with that empowerment, you really both can do really great work without like bouncing into each other. I mean, that's another tip. I think, if you have a co-founder also, maybe get executive coaching. Maybe go to like, we went to Into Y Combinator. Some of the best companies like Apple and Google did have executive coaches. Twitter, it's like being an athlete, you have a coach who can help you.
I did want to talk a little bit about, the school. Because I went to Auburn University. It's like a school. I think there's like only one company that went where the founders went through Y Combinator. There were Auburn alumni before us. And like going to such like a small school with not really much of an entrepreneurship program, fairly small relative to some of, the Ivy Leagues of the world. I definitely felt some imposter syndrome going out there, like trying to raise capital, going through YC. Like, did you feel that having gone to Stony Brook?
I definitely think that there's like a circle of people that have like, I'd call it like magic fairy dust. Like if you went to Harvard, you have this like big check of approval. If you went to Stanford, it's a big check of approval. If you went to MIT, it's a big check of approval. So like those are like some of the best schools out there that get a lot of love. I think the entrepreneurial mindset, having the entrepreneurial mindset, like it was not as prominent when I went to school. Again, like I'm dating myself a little bit, but the schools now are changing. I think they're all changing where they're realizing, oh, like students need to like figure out how to maybe possibly build their own business. And we need to teach them that. When I went to school, that was not the case. And it was like, how do you educate the student and get them to figure out how to get a job? Did I feel imposter syndrome? The answer is no. I think I always felt like it gave me an advantage and a disadvantage all at the same time. So I went to a state school, Stony Brook University. Tuition is minimal. The school is funding like if you live in New York and you go to the school, they basically charge, what is it, like, I don't know, $6,000 a year. I was able to come out of that school with not as much debt as like people that went to these like other schools. I think you should become the advocate for your school. Like, because you went to Y Combinator, I think people just need to be educated. You need to teach other kids like there is another way, like, and it's not just going to work for, a large corporation. There is another way, and you did it. Like, you're living it. I do think it, like, if you go to one of those other schools, you're loaded with debt. So you're kind of at a disadvantage and you feel entitled. Like, life is easy. I went to Stanford. Life is easy, but I have this debt, but I deserve a good job because I went to Stanford. There's also that mindset that, but the school I went to, like, most of the students struggled and they didn't have wealth, and like they could pay for the school, and the school like funded a lot of it to get all these students educated. I had a different advantage. Like, I didn't have all of those student loans, but it also gave me humble beginnings to like actually work hard to build the company. You get a lot of these like really, great graduate students that come from these great schools and they just fail because they don't want to do the work. But, I do hear that like a lot of investors in the investor community, it's communities of like pockets of people who went to Harvard or pockets of people who went to Stanford. So like they trust the founder more, right? So you are at that disadvantage where like you may have like a VC firm that like everyone went to Harvard or MIT and you didn't go. So why would they invest in you, Daniel? Like, why you? Because they went to MIT. They know that the school has a certain way of doing things. It creates that trust system. I mean, did I ever feel imposter syndrome? Probably it was way harder because I didn't have that pedigree. So there's probably some questions of who I was. So you have to maybe prove yourself a little bit more.
What you were saying earlier about like how universities and schooling had traditionally been designed to like create like great workers or employees. Like, I've had like a number of young aspiring founders, some founders who've already started between like 17 and 20 years old. They'll come to me and be like, why should I even go to school? I could just start the thing now. What would you say to those founders?
I would say find a school that's not going to load you full of debt. Don't just go for the degree, I think they call it like collecting badges. Like, I went to Harvard, now I got to go to work at Google. Don't go to school to get a trophy. Like, at the end of the day, you're going to meet your really close friends in college and you're going to learn how to like live on your own. You're going to experience the world in a really good way. I worry about people like loading up on just debt. That really concerns me. Like, when you trap a student, if you're going to go to school to become a doctor, you better be sure you're going to become a doctor. And I know a lot of people who don't want to be doctors and they come out of school and they're like, I have the debt now. I have no choice. And they're really unhappy. And I'm like, be really careful, because if you don't even want to do the job, doctors are amazing. It's like, become a medical professional, do like some people that want to do that. It's like good. But when someone like doesn't want to do it, and I see the defeat in them from like all that debt, it's crushing like on their soul. And I'm like, it's not good. But a 17-year-old, I would say just go to college, find really good, smart friends, find the smartest people in that college, become really good friends with them, and like have fun with people and learn how to live on your own, learn how to do your launch. And then like, if you want to run a company, do it while you're in school. Like Aaron from Box.com, he started his company in school and like was building it in school. And like,
yeah, we started ours like when my co-founder and I were 20, like still like students at Auburn. But I don't know, I've met a few 18, 19-year-olds who are in their freshman year or about to go into college. And they're like, I know what I want. I'm obsessed. I'm dedicated. I want to do the startup life. I refuse to accept that the default path, just going through, the assembly line of education. I've heard that before. Like, what would you say to those young founders who already know what they want and perhaps could do their laundry as well?
I couldn't have started my company without the co-founder I found in school. School isn't about the education. It's about the network. And it's like learning who you can like work with and like build things with, and like that network becomes a lifelong network. I talk to a lot of people from college. Like, I went to college, have really good friends from college. That network is a really good support system to like a sounding board. That's why I'm concerned, like when people go for the trophy name, I'm going to go to MIT, just be prepared to pay that debt. Like, that's the problem when you take a trophy name company. So like for me, I went to Stony Brook University and I capitalized like crazy on the network. And it wasn't it was just like me having fun, finding my way. Like, I would have never done computer science if I didn't go to Stony Brook. I went to a school that was very computer science heavy. And I was like, this is cool. It's like challenging. It's different. So like you're going to learn all different sorts of things. But if someone is dead set on starting a company, like maybe try school, like, I don't know, the 2-year degrees, associate degrees, like you could get an associate degree.
This is an argument that I gave when I was speaking to one such founder. Like I met a founder who dropped out freshman year of college. I met him when he was like 23, 24, and I could feel like the lack of socialization, not having gone through that rite of passage. Perhaps I met a particularly immature fellow, but like I think there's something you learn where like society like molds you into being more acceptable, more fluid, or more better social chameleon, perhaps. So yeah, I could see that side of it also. What about like with the actual things you learned from like your coursework, like psychology and computer science? Did that help you become more successful in life and as a founder? Or was it more about the network as like first place in terms of value?
I mean, I think the network was the most important part. And then, of course the schooling was important. It helped, but I think the network like was insurmountably more important, where you just get a really good group of people. And this is the thing about Y Combinator. You get that group of people when you plug into that network. Most smartest people in the world, like brainstorming. Schools are that. Like you don't realize, like if you go out and you don't get into Y Combinator and you don't go to school, you're on your own and there's no network to like bounce ideas off of, and you're kind of struggling. I spoke to one founder, like one of the best founders I ever met. The guy's brilliant. He went to Harvard. He's like, I went there for the network. Then he went to Y Combinator, went there for the network. Then he went to Google. And he's like, I went to Google for the network. Blew my mind. He didn't go work. He didn't do it for the money. He's like, I need to know who these people are so I can learn from them. And he's one of the smartest founders I know. Guys raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm like, I didn't think about Google that way. And I was like, that blew my mind. I was like, interesting. Like Google is in itself like a network of people. The Googler community is like another tap of smart people out there. Can everyone be that way? The answer is no. Like if you quit college, you don't even go to college, like you may not think of things that way. You may just like be sitting in your office alone and just like hiding and not actually showing people product. Like you have to get out there and show people product like all day long, right? Like you have to talk about it, you have to demo it, you have to basically get feedback and iterate. If you don't go to college and you don't socialize, it worries me. That's all. I don't think it's true of everybody, but like even Mark Zuckerberg, he met his co-founders in college. Like Larry and Sergey met their co-founders in college. Like Steve Jobs met his co-founder because they lived next to each other. I mean, that's not quite a network, but still it was like they hung out together a lot.
Before wrapping up, I wanted to ask, like, if there was like a wild story you could share with us that you maybe haven't shared with anyone before. That, it could be startup related, it could just be life related. Anything you can share that's like really out of left field?
Trying to have a crazy story. I mean, I've been to the White House.
Wow. Yeah, that's a crazy one. What was that all about?
Yeah, so I mean, in my first company, we were really innovative. We built the first API. Not the first. We built one of the first APIs in healthcare for medical records. And the White House was super interested in like what we were doing, and we were very innovative. And the White House invited us to sit in a round table with a bunch of other people in the industry. And it was Joe Biden. So Joe Biden was there. He was the vice president, and then Obama was the president at the time. But I remember thinking like, how did I get here? Little room, and being like, I don't know how I'm in this room, but this is awesome. I felt really grateful, but at the same time, I was like, I was just trying to make a living. And now I'm in this room with all these really smart people that run the whole country. And Joe Biden was super interesting. He was very passionate about healthcare. And, I didn't know this, but his son died, and he was talking about how his son couldn't get his medical records. When his son was really ill, he couldn't get his medical records fast enough between two different places. So it caused a passion in the medical side that I didn't know that about, like, him. He became president now, now he's president, but at the time he was vice president. I'm like, wow, that was a big passion of his. That's crazy. That was a crazy story. Like, I remember thinking I could go to the White House in jeans. They told me no, I got to get a suit. I literally went out to a store and was like, let me go buy a suit because I'm going to go to the White House. Didn't know it was required. You got to wear a suit when you go in there. I had no idea that they don't like that. They're like, I remember writing an email like, can I come in jeans? Is that okay? And they're like, no, please wear a suit. I'm like, okay, got to go buy a suit.
That's incredible. That's a great story. That's a great dinner story for sure. So you got to talk to Joe about healthcare, and healthcare still seems quite broken here in the U.S. And you're quite the expert on the space, having spent more than a decade working in it. Is there anything that you think we could do to fix it, to perhaps make it more affordable, more effective, like for the average American, like from a tech lens, perhaps, if possible?
I mean, it's very complicated. There's so many moving parts. Like, one is I do think things are getting digitized for the first time. Like, data is like really moving well between like industries, and like one hospital can send data to another. And it is a struggle still in that sense. But I think like insurance companies, it's still a mess. I am worried that the insurance like rate, and everybody has to pay more every year in insurance. It's going up at such a rapid pace. I'm like, I don't think it's sustainable forever. Like the insurance companies are like, they raise their rates every year by 15%, whatever it is. So I'm like, at some point, it's going to be all of your salary. Like if you can't raise people's rates that fast forever, like they're going to start to like not have health insurance. So, how do you fix that? I don't know. I mean, there's so many different areas to tackle with this. Like, I mean, I do think that there's real opportunities out there, like with AI, right? And that means like medical billing is really complex. Like, use some AI to fix some of that and make it less complex. Like, the human body is really complex. Like, doctors only have so much time with a person. Use AI to like figure out how to help people. There are so many different use cases, like, x-rays. You have to have a radiologist look at an x-ray. Like, I do hear really great things about like AI determining if someone has cancer or not. So, instead of having a radiologist look at each of these like x-rays, you can have it at the fraction of a cost with like AI just basically giving you an answer in that. Spoke to one founder, and he's really passionate about like detecting cancer. You do a cancer screening every year for like $150. He's like, I can figure this out. So I'm like, if you get people like that can detect cancer for $150, everybody would pay for that. Like, you'd probably pay for it for your parents. You'd be like, hey, you're going to go get your cancer screening. I'm paying for it, Dad. Like, it's like something like there's more empowerment. So some of it is technology can help in some of those ways, but some of these areas are really complex, like the insurance company issue. Like, they can't keep raising their rates. It's crazy. If they keep doing it and everybody's income level is like just going up at like whatever, 4%, 5%, 6%. Yet if an insurance company is raising their rate by 15% a year, something's going to happen. At some point, I'm like, oof, this is going to be crazy. Maybe new insurance companies will compete. I don't know. And like make everybody change everything. It's definitely an area where I'm like, oh, it's really complex. And I'm like, maybe it's not a startup. Maybe it's a bigger like issue across the United States. Like, thought about using like what an NFT represents. Can you use the NFT to create something like a birth certificate, death certificate, or like a marriage certificate? And then an NFT could be used to like across different states. Right now, everything is like kind of on paper, like similar idea. And I'm like, it's kind of like you kind of have to like find the right place to get the certificate. But I'm like, that type of startup has to have buy-in from the government. If it doesn't, it just dies. And I think this is one of those ones where like the government maybe has to help. A lot of people are going without like health insurance now, and more people can't afford it. Companies can only tolerate so much expense. Never say never. Like, I think maybe I'm just not the right founder for for like tackling those two problems that I just like brought up.
Like, if you take a look at like Uber or Brex, like at their beginnings, like they were breaking the rules and asking for forgiveness later. Are there really problems that startups can't solve? Like where they can't start off breaking the rules, finding something that's just so much better, like evolutionarily or revolutionarily, not evolutionarily better, where they could like solve that, like the birth certificate problem, for example? Or are there really problems that are reserved for governments, like state actors?
There probably is a way to do it where you can get traction. And like, it's like what Elon Musk did with like rockets. Like, he somehow got buy-in, somehow was able to like have regulation embrace it, and now he's just shooting rockets. He figured it out for that industry. Like, I'm sure people can figure out other industries, like how to make things different, like just better.
Nothing a startup can't solve with enough determination, right?
With the right people, they'll figure something out.
They'll figure something out. It's all about the people. On that note, I think that might be a good place to stop, Daniel. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Is there any parting words you might share to young founders out there that want to, achieve great things achieve tremendous success the way you have, and anything you might share with them before we wrap it up?
Learn as much as possible, first and foremost. Like, there's so many resources out there now that I did not have when I started. All of it is online. Like, just continually read, devour as much as possible. I would actually talk to as many founders in Silicon Valley. They're very open to talking. Reach out to them and say, I'm a founder. I'd love to pick your brain. Talk to them about starting their company. You'd be surprised at who you can get. Be bold and just don't be scared to talk to people also. I think that that's a really good trait.